Hey everybody, this is Tom with VermiBag. Today I'm going to go ahead and finish up the worm separation that I started last week, pulling the worms out of the VermiBag Tote and then putting them into a large Rubbermaid tub with a larger bait container in the center. And the key to this is having a large surface area and a small distance so the worms don't have to migrate very far to get into your bait container. Now, if you didn't see the previous video, go ahead and go back and check that one out. Show you how we did the setup. So all I'm going to do today real quickly is go ahead and pull this big, large Rubbermaid tub up, scrape off all the excess material at the top of it and put it into a mortar tray. And then we'll go ahead and pull that bait tray out, dump it out, and see exactly how many worms we got out. I think since I let this go for 10 days, I don't think I'll have to do it again. So the remaining material in here, I'll put it into a mortar tray. And if I have to put a single bait tray or something in there and try and get any excess worms out, I will. But I'm pretty confident that by leaving this 10 days, most of those worms are probably going to be inside my little bait trap. And one thing I will note, I did come in the middle of the week. And if you watch the previous video, I filled that bait tray completely full of material all the way to the top. And I came in at about 6 days later, and it actually dropped about 2 inches. So those worms had already been inside that bait tray working the material so well that they caused the level to drop by 2 inches. So I put some additional bedding on top of it along with a little of my homemade worm chow that I make from the bird seed. And then I put a container or a lid on top of it, and it's been sitting ever since. So let's pull that thing out here and dump it out and see how many worms we have in there and see if we have a successful separation of worms. Okay, so this is the Rubbermaid tub that we put everything into, and it's just been sitting here with this little vermi cover over the top of it for the last 10 days. And again, even after I filled this container here up completely about 4 days ago, you can see it's down again, probably about 1.5 inches. So that's a total of about 3 inches that the level of the center bait tray has dropped over the period of the last 10 days. So, you know, I'm very confident that the worms are in here just working this material down a lot. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and scrape all this excess material. Since the bin here wasn't quite big enough, remember I had to pile this up fairly high. So I want to go ahead and pull this material out and go ahead and I have a tray over here on this side here. I'm just going to pull this out and set it in here for I can kind of get access to this bait tray before I can pull it out. I'm just going to place a little cover over the top of the center here if I don't get a lot of material in here, and if I do, I can pull it out. That's pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and there's one worm right there. Okay, so now I have access to this bait tray so I can go ahead and grab a hold of it and pull it out. Really wet, really wet. But I think overall I definitely see a lot of worms. You can see the amount of worms that are in this container is a bunch, to say the least. I mean, anywhere I go, or oodles, as they would say. Zoom in a little bit closer. Yeah, so pretty successful here. There are a lot of worms in here. And we'll take a look at the material that we left, or they were coming out of actually. We'll see how many worms we have in there. I definitely know there's a few in there. I could see a couple as we were dumping the material out. But here, you know, this thing's just packed full of worms. And all I'm going to do is just take this material directly, because this was just fresh bedding and just some food, and I'm just going to dump this right on into the VermiBag Tote and set it up for another go-around. Yeah, real successful. I mean, there's a lot of worms in here. And real simple. I mean, I really didn't have to do anything other than fill this thing up, stick it in there, and let it sit for 10 days. So we'll go ahead and pull up the remaining material and see how many worms are left in the material that we pulled these guys out of. So this is the material I pulled all around the edges. And just quickly looking at this, I really don't see hardly any worms in this. There's an occasional one here and there, but for the most part, you know, pretty successful on that. Let me go ahead and grab the Rubbermaid tub that has a majority of the material and dump it in here and see what it looks like. You know, as this material it drained towards the bottom. So towards the bottom here, yeah. I mean, there's a few worms here, occasional one here and there. You know, I'm going to say each handful I have, there's probably 4 or 5 worms there maybe. A couple there. You know, a couple there. Yeah, hardly any there. I mean, yeah, there's a few worms in here, but I mean, I can't imagine there's more than, you know, 100 or so worms, maybe a couple hundred worms left in this whole container. So what I'm going to do with this is go ahead and pull the material to one side like this, try and have more of a concentrated area. Then I'm going to go ahead and just dig a hole right here and go ahead and do one of my normal bait trays. Put a bait tray in here with some nice food, put it down, you know, about 5 to 6 inches, so quite a ways down here. Fill it up with food, and I'll let this sit for, you know, a week and try and pull these remaining worms out of this material. And this material also is a little bit wet. It's still too wet to sift, so that'll be good for it. I'll just put a light cover over the top of it. That way it'll start to dry out a little bit too. And while I'm waiting for it to dry out, I can capture the rest of those worms and then go ahead and put them into the VermiBag Tote. So let's go ahead and pull up the VermiBag Tote, and I'm just going to dump the material that we pulled out of that bait tray into the tote, and we'll set it up for another go-around. Okay, so this is all the material that we pulled out of the bait container inside the large Rubbermaid tub. All those worms are in here. So all I'm going to do is go ahead and open up the VermiBag Tote. And I have a tiny little bit of bedding at the bottom of this thing right now, just because there were a couple remaining worms in this tote when I did this initial separation. I didn't want them to die, so I just threw a tiny little layer in there just so they had somewhere to go and keep them alive. Now, there's no rocket science to this. I'm just literally going to dump this material, which is probably enough to get this tote started really good. Dump it in here. Not spilling too much of it, hopefully. And just like that, I'm set up pretty good. The one final thing I'm actually going to do for this, since this is pretty wet still, I'm going to go ahead and I'm not going to add my normal moistened bedding. I'm just going to add a layer of shredded paper on top of this to try and absorb just a little bit of this moisture so this thing doesn't start off real wet. Okay, so we're going to add that layer of shredded paper on the top of this thing, try and absorb some of that moisture, because like I said, it is pretty wet. So I'm just putting a layer of this on the top here. It'll actually absorb a lot of that moisture. So that's pretty well set up. So all I'm going to do now is place a cover on this thing, and I'm going to leave it for at least a week, maybe 2 weeks before I even worry about it, because there's plenty of food in there right now and it's plenty moist. So I'm going to let those worms just kind of get settled in, start working that material down. And in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, I'll do another quick little video and we'll kind of update you on how this new system is starting up using the material from the previous setup. One thing I've decided to do is do my update videos on the systems a little bit different. Rather than coming in and waiting a week and a half and then doing a video saying what I did and, you know, what it looks like at that particular time. I'm going to try and set up some cameras so I can basically just turn it on during the week every time I do something to the system. As I open it up, you can see it, and that'll be kind of like a time lapse. So you'll be able to see like a 2 or 3 week period in a matter of a minute. And you'll see every day what looks different when I add a little worm chow, whether I add a little bit of shredded paper, or I add my moistened bedding, or I feed it. So it'll be a much more informative video over a shorter period of time versus me opening up a system, digging around in a little bit, kind of saying the same thing over and over. The worms look good, it's a little dry, it's a little wet. This way you'll be able to see all that, everything that happens every time I open the system, what it looks like to me and what I do based on what it looks like. So I hope you found this video informative. If you have, I really do appreciate some thumbs up on these videos, because it does help promote the video and give me a little bit better ranking. So until next week or next time I make another video or update on this, this is Tom from VermiBag. Ciao.